What's going on, everybody? And thank you again for joining me for another online Bible study here this Sunday for our Sequoia Baptist Tabernacle Youth Group, or our SBTeen group. Today is a little more sweeter than it's been days previous because it's just another time to where I am closer to seeing you guys and hang out with you guys. And I miss you all like crazy. But here on April 19th, 2020, it seems like I only have a few more of these until we get to meet in this room again, congregate in this room again, and have actual Bible study that can be interactive and can be something to where we all can benefit and grow from. And so I'm really excited for that. I trust that you're doing well. I hope that you had a great week. I hope that your week was very eventful and that it was encouraging for yourself and for your family and even people that you may or even may not have come in contact with. And if you have come in contact with them, hopefully you're 6 feet away from them. But I do trust that it is a complete blessing to you. This week was a complete blessing to you. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from a lot of people about our last Bible study that we did because our senior, Katie Hamby, was on it and she did a remarkable job. So I'm really appreciative and thankful for that. I have another teenager that's going to be doing another one. I believe it will be next Sunday, so you want to tune in for that. But they've been a complete asset for our youth group as well, and I'm excited for that. And so got a couple of big things going on here for our online Bible study, but it's going to go over real well, and I trust that the Lord is going to bless you for it and because of it. Just want to make a quick announcement just to kind of keep you in the loop. In our, and this message is going to be specifically for our youth group. So parents and church members, just don't be afraid if you get lost in this. But in our Group Me chat, teenagers, and in our SBTeen youth group chat, Katie has been working on trying to do a Zoom online Bible study, which we've been wanting to do for a little bit. But of course, her and Zoe are a little more technologically advanced in that area than I am. So they got it all set up, and we're trying to do something like that here within the next week. So if you get a message from us inviting you to it, please join us. It's going to be a benefit to you. Number one, because we get to see all of each other again, at least virtually. And then number two, it's always cool to have a Bible study, even if it's on a screen and we're looking at each other's faces digitally. It's always cool to have a Bible study with a group. So keep in mind of that. I'll probably post something on Facebook too, so parents, if you happen to see it, let your young people know about it, and we'll try to do at least one Zoom online video chat Bible study to where we all could get together and at least share what God has been doing with us and for us this quarantine time. But with that being said, I'm going to jump right into it like I always typically do, and we're going to be in my favorite book of the Bible again. For those of you who do not know me or who may know me, if you were to ask me what is my favorite book in the Bible, I love the book of James. James is my favorite book. It's one of the deepest books that I've ever read in the Bible, and it's something that I consistently read over and over again, and God continues to just throw more truths and throw more nuggets of information for my particular life. So it's such a blessing for me to continue to read James. Of course, you got a lot of other different greats: 1 John, Psalms, Matthew, Revelation, Genesis, even Isaiah is a great book. And that's not to rank Bible books, if you will. All 66 are great, and all 66 can be used for our benefit and our growth. But if you ask for my favorite one, the one that has blessed me or benefited me the most, I would say it would be James. And God has used James to really speak to me and through me. And a lot of our church family have heard the message on my life verse in James 4, 7, and 8. And if you haven't read that verse, take a look at it. But we're not going to be there today. We're going to be in James chapter 1. And I want to talk to you about your mindset that you ought to have during this quarantine time. Not even just in quarantine, teenager, but just in life in general. There is no doubt about the fact that life is not necessarily easy in any way, shape, or form. And life is not prejudiced to age. So I don't care if you're 66, 36, or 16, life is difficult in your particular stages. Now, I would say that a 36-year-old battles things differently than a 16-year-old. And of course, a 66-year-old 36-year-old would battle something differently than a 36-year-old. But with that being said, it doesn't negate the fact that life is not a cakewalk. There are going to be difficult things that we go through in life and we have in life. And even something deeper and far greater than a global pandemic, you and I will go through things that are really going to challenge us and really affect us, possibly in a negative way. I've always been troubled by adults specifically who would say something like, well, teenagers have nothing to be afraid of or nothing to be fearful of. They're young, life is good for them, and everything is all peachy and keen. And nothing could be further from the truth in some of these teenagers' lives. I know teenagers that literally have broken households, that they are a product of their parents being just constantly dipped in drug and alcohol abuse, or they have struggles their personal selves with those things, and they're in the wrong crowds and they do things just for a sense of justification, but it's coming from the wrong aspect and it completely destroys their life. And there's a bit of a difficulty that happens in teenagers' lives. I know of our young people, particularly in this church, spend a lot of time with them. I hear a lot of stories from them, and there are some hardships that go on in our youth group. And a lot of people in our youth group, a lot of you teenagers, know the different things that we're struggling with. And what I want to do is I want to help remind you of the mindset that you ought to have when those tough times or those difficult times come in. This is more than just COVID-19, right? This is more than just the idea that we have been locked for probably 2 months from normalcy of life. This is something to where you are going to need to have in your mindset for the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, further on down the road in life, when you are really going to be struggling with certain things of your different areas in life. And I want to help with your mindset of how you should overcome your temptations, your trials, your hardships, and all those things are going to just visibly break you down. And we're going to look at James chapter 1, and we're going to see exactly what James says that the mindset that you and I should have. James 1, and we're going to begin reading in verse number 2, where the Bible says, "My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing." And so here, James is already talking about the idea that you and I need to have a particular mindset. By the way, this is in verse number 2. James literally in verse number 1 is saying, "Hi, I'm James." And then verse number 2, James is telling you exactly how you should live. That's like you visiting my youth group, right? And you introduce yourself to me. "Hi, I'm so-and-so." And I go, "Hi, I'm Taj. Your breath stinks. You need to brush your teeth a little more." It's really aggressive and that's really ridiculous. But the idea is James has a message that he wants us to understand, and he has a mindset that he wants us to grasp, and he wants us to grasp it from the forefront and from the jump all the way to the end of the letter of James. And what he says is, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations. Now, that idea of divers temptations, the word divers can be translated into the word of different, okay? So different temptations or different trials. And what is the mindset that you and I are supposed to have with our different trials? Well, James says, count it all joy. Joy. Joy is the mindset that you and I should have when we have trials that go on in our lives. Let me explain it this way. I've said this upstairs before in our youth room, and I've said this to our youth group before. But joy and happiness are essentially two different things, even though they connotate or they deliver on the same emotion, if you will. So happiness is circumstantial. I've had a preacher tell me before that happiness is just based on the circumstance that's going on in your life. You give me $1 million cash, I'm going to be happy. The Atlanta Falcons win the Super Bowl, I am going to be happy, okay? You don't give me $1 million cash, and I'll just live life like it is. The Falcons lose the Super Bowl, I might spiral in depression. I don't know. But with those things being said, happiness is very circumstantially based. People are not always happy all the time. It's not a lifestyle that people are consistently in because it tends to fluctuate. Joy is something, though, that is God-given, that is based on the goodness of God and the reliance on God for all of the things that you have. So it doesn't matter what the circumstance is, you can have joy. And the example of it is James tells us that you ought to have joy even when you're falling into different trials. So if you have that tough life or that tough hardship that you're going through, whether it be abusive home or abusive relationship or anything of that sort of nature, if you're addicted to the wrong thing, or you have, for the older crowd, maybe you have a health issue, or you have some sort of burden that's on your heart that is just completely weighing you down, what the Bible tells us is that you and I need to count it all joy. Now, am I saying that you and I should be joyful in those addictions, joyful in that abuse, and be thankful that we're being abused? No, not necessarily. In fact, God knows the wrongship that's going on, and He will address that. And God knows the pain that you're going through, and He will comfort you for it. But because He will address it, and because He will comfort you, that's part of the reason why you and I should still be able to count it all joy, because God knows about it, and God will take care of it when He sees fit. There's nothing for you and I to be concerned about. And anything that we go through in our life that might be difficult, in fact, we should be joyful at the fact that we have an answer by God, and we have a God who is going to take care of us for the entire situation. Those who aren't saved don't have that. You recognize that? Those who don't have Jesus Christ, the abuse they're in is just abuse, and it's going to stay that way. Of course, barring the situation gets better, but what I'm saying, you're outside of Christ, and so with that being said, even if that gets better, still, you don't have Christ in you. You don't have the Holy Spirit dwelling in you, and so there's no real reason for joy in that essence. And you and I have that particular reason of joy, that is in Jesus Christ. So count it all joy. It's tough. It's tough to look at the world sometimes today with everything that's going on and a lot of things. And this is just larger than COVID-19, okay? With some of the things that's going on from a social standpoint or a political standpoint, or even just sometimes monetarily or economically. With all the things that are going on, it's hard to find joy, but I'm here to tell you that your joy is not based on anything that this earth or this life can provide. If you're trying to base your joy off of what this earth can provide, guys, you're going to be insanely miserable if that's the case, because the world can't provide it. Sure, the world might be able to provide some sort of happiness. Yeah. But how long does that last? Not very. But joy is something that's God-given, and it can be given from God. Now, why is it that you and I should be considered joyful when we go through different trials or diverse temptations? The Bible tells us in verse number 3 that knowing the fact that you ought to be joyful in your temptation, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh, a P word that most of us lack. Patience. You and I are working in times to where things are just always instant, right? For instance, you were able to get this video just by clicking a button, okay? You guys aren't in here looking at me, and you didn't have to wait till 5 o'clock this evening up here waiting for me. If you're watching this on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Thursday or 2 years from now, you got it by just simply clicking on it. There's a lot of different instant things that we're doing in today's culture, right? For instance, there's instant mashed potatoes, right? You just put hot water in some of that mashed potato powder, goodness, whatever, stir it up, and then boom, there you go. You got mashed potatoes, because we're too lazy to peel the skin off potatoes and crush it and mash it up and put some butter on it and cook it up. Our life is so instant nowadays. We have things on demand, and we can get it whenever we want. Amazon is offering free 2-day shipping, so you can get things quicker. And even for most people, like me, who may shop online, 2 days is way too long. I like to buy something and have it now, right? But here's the thing. We can use a little bit more patience in our world, and a little bit more patience in our life. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith is going to work some patience. Patience for what? Patience that God is the one that's going to provide our needs in His time, for His purpose, and for His glory, which is the exact idea that we should have in anything in our life, all for the glory of God. And that patience will draw to that. If I am going through a tough time, and it takes 20 years for God to get his glory out of it, that would be worth it. Because the trying of that faith that worketh patience is going to provide something in my life that is going to be pure and entire for me. And this is what verse 4 says, that let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire. Think about those two phrases for a second, right? That we may be perfect and entire. Perfection is something that you and I are consistently striving for. And entire is the idea of being whole or filled. And then the Bible says wanting nothing. That's the idea that you have no needs, that you have no lack. Because you're so full of joy and the patience that God has given you through your temptation, there is no need that you have, because all of it is going to be provided by Christ and through Christ. Guys, recognize that in the far scheme of things, any need that you already have, Christ already sees, and you ought to just be patient and joyful in the fact that God's going to provide for it. COVID-19 didn't scare Christ. This isn't a surprise. Hey, guys, the relationships that you're in, it didn't scare Christ. The health concerns that you have, or the money concerns that you have, it didn't catch Christ by surprise. But rather, what he wants you to do is, instead of sitting there and worrying yourself, he wants you to place that to him and say, Lord, here's my situation. I trust you for it. And be patient. And let patience have its perfect work. Because you know what's going to happen? Even if you're still in those situations, you're going to be whole. And you're going to be perfect with no needs. And that's a mindset and a state that a Christian ought to dwell in and ought to continue to live in. It is something that is attainable for you, teenager, whether you're 12 or 18, for college students, for young families, for middle-aged families, and for older families or older people. Being joyful in your trials and being joyful in your tribulations is something that is absolutely obtainable if you just let go and let God. There's nothing in your life that you can present to God where God's going to be like, I have no idea what to do. So if that's the truth, then why do we worry? There's nothing else for me to do but to be joyful, because I know that even in my need, now Christ already knows his provision for it. He's going to provide for it. Teenagers, stick it out. Some of you are going through a lot of difficult times. I've had a couple of you text me this week about some things you want me to pray for, and I totally get that and I respect that. But recognize this. In your tough time, recognize that God is the one that's going to provide for you. He always has, and he always will. And he's the one that's going to make that provision for you. And you're going to develop a patience, and you're going to develop a joy that you never thought you had. You're going to recognize that even in those difficulties, you have no needs, because Christ is sufficient and his provision is enough. And that's just a piece of truth that I want you guys to take with you this week as we get closer to seeing each other and being with each other. I love you all, and I can't wait to see you for our video Zoom Bible chat and our next online Bible study on Wednesday.